I start the recording. Hello, Mark.
I gotcha.
From
Hey,
a
everyone.
beautiful chalet or from...
No, I'm at home.
Okay, so still Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 1803. Diana, uh, admit. Michelle, would you like me to chair or would you like to chair?
As you wish. We didn't discuss it. Depends how you feel. I'm happy either way, Grazia.
Uh, just go ahead.
Okay, I'll do that. Have you pressed the recording button? Yes, you have.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me because it's important, but I did. Yeah. And
Okay.
so I can better admit the participant. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Elders for Disarmament and the Cultures of Peace. As usual, I think we've got a really exciting conversation coming up. But we have our usual agenda with the points that are um, well, they're the same ones, and it's good to revisit them each time to update ourselves. I think you've all received the agenda, so we'll start with the first point. Quick report back from participants about relevant initiatives, upcoming events, if there's anything brewing in your part of the world which you would like us to know about. Please come in the room. Remember to unmute. No? Have you got, you've raised your hand, Grazia? Yeah,
Oh, Beverly first.
Beverly first.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Saturday is another day of action across the United States. This one, the focus is all of these prisons that are being built in, sort of without permission of local communities, a lot of them in rural areas. So it's going to be a very large day of action on Saturday again.
Really important. Thank you, Beverly, for that. Yeah. Who was next? Grazia?
Yes, because I heard from a number of people who are right now participating in particular actions. Helena, for instance, is participating in a Women in Black action in London, and it is about the part of the Global Days of Action on Military Spending. And I wanted to, oh, sorry, I need to. Welcome someone inside. And I wanted, in fact, to ask you whether we can sign as a group the global, it's called Call to Action Against Global Militarization. If you want to read it, is in online in various languages at www.demilitarize.org. And it is part of this month of action, a global month of action for against military spending. There is another person who will join us later because now is participating on a peace march for Earth Day. And this time, Earth Day is an Earth Day for peace and climate justice. So it's there are many things that are happening. If you have objections about signing as a group for this call to action against global militarization, please let me know and then we can discuss it together. Thanks.
Grazia, can I suggest you put in the chat the link to the first one?
Okay, I will.
So everyone can have a chance to read it and then take a position. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for those points. Are there any more items we need to hear about? No, I don't see
Michelle,
any. Yes, yes, please do, Faizi.
I'm sorry, I don't get the hand button here to request, so that's why I opened the microphone.
That's absolutely fine.
Just wanted to share that I have written a letter to the UN Secretary General on the plight of the 35 million expatriate workers in the Gulf countries amidst the war, in the making of which they have no role at all. And the UN is not at all involved in addressing this issue. They are not trying to bring about a dialogue between the parties. And these people, 35 million people, are far more than the native populations. So I was writing to the Secretary General for his involvement in mediating peace in the name of these people and put them also on the agenda. They're not on the agenda so far. And no media is even writing about them, their issues. So my letter has received quite some responses, especially also from some UN delegations. And then subsequently, I also wrote an op-ed article for Indian Express that also created quite some debate, especially in this expatriate migrant workers communities.
Mm.
So that's something, but nothing concrete is happening and may not happen either. Okay.
Thank you, Fauzi. Again, if you want to put links to those two letters, well, the letter and the article in the chat, that would be great. I've seen the letter and I thought it was a really good letter.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing that. Very powerful. Yeah.
I'll see if I can technically do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other items to highlight here?
Mm.
Tom, did you want to say something?
No.
No? Okay. In that case, maybe we could go to our first-time participants, if we have any. We usually ask first-time participants to briefly introduce themselves. Is there anyone new? And I'll ask help from Grazia here.
I'm delighted that we have Mariam Abazeri for the first time. So,
Mariam, yeah. And Alexander, you introduced yourself on the previous occasion, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, Mariam, over to you. We're all ears.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be able to join today. My name is Mariam Abozadi. I'm an assistant professor of environmental science at the Arizona State University. I've been interested in joining you all. I've been receiving emails about this, and today was finally like the first day that I could make it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And very happy to see you, and welcome to the group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else to introduce, let's move on to the presentation of Minister Évariste Bartolo. I'll just briefly highlight a few things here. Évariste is a well-known journalist, university lecturer, and public speaker. He's actually spent many years, decades, as a member of parliament and 11 years as Minister for Education and Employment and for European and Foreign Affairs in the Republic of Malta. Évariste Bartolo is a member of the Labour Party, and he's been very successful at campaigning and getting through progressive reforms like civil rights and marriage equality, freedom of information, abolishing of censorship, and better protection for journalists, and also big gains around childcare and life skill training for all. So these are substantial gains in the public domain that Évariste has facilitated or pushed through. Évariste has been an active person in conflict resolution and the promotion of peace, and has championed the treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons. I hope it's okay, Évariste, to call you Évariste. Yes.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. And you've proposed a very exciting, well, timely presentation entitled "What Can We All Do Together to Refuse Colonial Mindsets, Militarism, and the Ongoing Normalization of Genocide?" So we're very keen to hear your views on this. You have about, half an hour to share some thoughts. It can be more, can be less. We're very flexible with time. And then we'll open it up for comments, questions, answers. We try and close around, an hour and a half after starting. But if we need to go beyond that time, again, we have some flexibility. For people who are not here, we have a full recording of this session, and that will be shared on our website as usual. And I know a lot of people were very keen to be here today, Evariste, so they will be looking at the recording. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel. And please do draw my attention when you feel that I have fallen into the habit of politicians of speaking too much. And what I would like to start straight away is that what is missing from the biographical sketch you've given, Michel, is that I am a grandfather of a 10-year-old granddaughter. And I think that that is the most important thing I'm doing now. And worried about the future and the kind of world that she is growing into. I ask myself, what kind of world is she growing into? And I am very, very worried. What kind of world we're leaving for those behind us. I must say, one of the things that have shocked me most in my political life is sitting around tables where very important decisions are taken, and you try to draw attention to the future, and from people who should know better, you get the answer, but we won't be there then. So let the others who come after us deal with that problem. I think that that is really, really shocking. And unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges that we face today is how short-termist we have become, and that the problems that we need to solve are long-term problems, and they cannot be solved with simply thinking of the next election, instead of thinking what's going to happen in 10 years' time, what's going to happen in 20 years' time. I just want to say some information about the small islands that I am coming from, because I think that that helps to frame also what I'm going to say. So I'm coming from the Maltese Islands, just below Sicily in the central Mediterranean. And we are very small. If I point them on the map, you won't be seeing them because I will cover them with my finger. So we are as small as that. We are dots on the map. We've had about 8,500 years of human presence. And of those 8,500 years, if we were to collapse them into 24 hours, we've been sovereign and independent only in the last 10 minutes, because we've been independent since 1964. For all those thousands of years before, we've been colonized, and we've also been used and abused as military and naval bases of great powers. Could be the Carthaginians, could be the Romans, the Aragonese, the Angevins, the Knights of Malta, France, Napoleon, the British Empire. We've seen them all. We've seen them all. And also, because we are where we are in the central Mediterranean, we've been a frontier country where we are literally on the fault line between Christians and Muslims. And for many years, we've been told we are the defenders of Christianity against paganism and against the Muslim world. So all these ingredients are part of our makeup. And I think that also forms how we are. In terms of population, we are less than, well, around 500,000 people. GDP, okay, you can imagine we're small, but life has improved a lot since we became independent. In terms of military expenditure, our budget won't buy half a missile. You know, it won't be enough to buy half a missile. So we are not in a position to threaten others. In fact, constitutionally, not only are we neutral, but we prohibit ourselves from joining any military alliance or to have naval and military bases on Malta. And that is constitutional. To change that, you need two-thirds majority. It hasn't been easy to get to this point because every great power in the Mediterranean had wanted to occupy Malta or to deny it to others because of our strategic location. Obviously today, because of the technology of transport and the way armaments have developed, that is not important. We are not important in terms of geographical and geopolitical location, but NATO is still interested in somehow or other having a soft presence in Malta, if not really a base. So our commitment for peace and neutrality has to be ongoing. It's not something that we achieved and it's there forever. So we have to really be on the alert. Coming to the global situation, there's no need for me to say that we have a world on fire. And usually when a place is on fire, we shout fire, fire, but more than ever, we need to shout water, water, because a lot of people are aware that we are in a very difficult time, but how to deal with this? We are at a time when we're at an all-time high in terms of conflicts. There are at least 56 conflicts going on around the world, very serious conflicts. 30 of them are even more serious than the others. You know, just Ukraine, Gaza, the Middle East, the Gulf, Myanmar, you know, in Africa. But these are what are called the hot wars. There are also silent wars going on, which also have casualties, very serious casualties. And usually these are not mentioned in the statistics of how many people have been killed since World War II in the wars that have happened all over the globe. And I'm here referring to a very interesting study carried out by a very reputable medical magazine called The Lancet. And last October, they published a study on the impact of US and EU sanctions. And the statistics there are terrific. I mean, terrible. I had to reread it to make sure that I'm not, getting it wrong. At least 38 million people have died as a result of sanctions between 1970 and 2021. And since then, obviously, there are more sanctions, and usually the most vulnerable people are hurt. I'm mentioning these statistics because recently I took part in a conference in Palermo, and the person who spoke before me, talking about the utopia of high tech and how we have become better, we have become more civilized, that even in wars we kill less people than before. Obviously, that was a very optimistic assessment of the world, and he did not include these kind of economic wars that are going on, because today, more than ever before, the economy and trade is the continuation of war by other means. I mean, it's enough even now with the closure of Hormuz and the lack of energy and fertilizers coming out of the Gulf area, the impact that it's going to have on hunger. We're not talking here about economic activity, but basic hunger with urea and the other fertilizers that come out of there. So it's warfare. That's warfare as well. There are different ways of killing people. You don't always need to kill them with a machine gun or with a missile. You can also kill them with hunger and with sanctions. So that is important, because I think it's an area of diplomacy which we need to address. I'll just mention 2 points to make myself more clear, and especially Grazia, what you were saying about signing a document about militarization. There's a very interesting story of a native Indian chief who said that he has 2 dogs fighting within him. No, one is a good dog and the other one is an evil dog. And he was asked, so which dog wins? And he said, it's the dog that we feed most. Now, if we see how much we feed the dog of war and how much we feed the dog of peace, there is no comparison. Even if we just take the statistics of 2 years ago, for every dollar that we spend on the United Nations, we spend around $700 on military expenditure. But more than how much we spend on military expenditure, there are other aspects which are really frightening about the military-industrial complex, which now today is the digital military-industrial complex. It's the AI military-industrial complex, because together with the traditional military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, in 1961, now it is becoming more frightening, because the high-tech companies like Palantir and the others are moving into the military, and what we've been told recently by Karp, what kind of utopia he has for us in terms of, that we need to become more hostile, more assertive of a dominant culture, and using AI together with the military to again assert the domination of the West. I mean, it is really frightening. But apart from that, what is really, I think, worrying today is not just the influence on governments, but actually the military-industrial complex in a number of countries, not only in the United States, have captured the state. So it's not just, we've gone much, much, much beyond what Eisenhower very wisely had warned us, showing us again that people who have had experience of war and people who are from the military are wiser about war than politicians, and who send other people's sons and daughters to fight in war, usually not theirs. But I repeat, what is really frightening today is the capture of the state by the military-industrial complex. Capture of the state, which includes also the capture of universities, the capture of think tanks, the capture of the media, and the capture of the entertainment industry, which is very frightening, because it's the entertainment industry which is the soft approach to also cultivate a culture of militarization, a culture of hate towards other cultures, and to do it in a very gentle way. They don't yell at you, they don't scream at you, but the stories and the perspectives that they narrate are very frightening. More than that, the capture of the state is how our democracies have turned into plutocracies, because it's really the rule of people of money, by people of money, for people of money. And this is really, I think, really has really corroded our democracies and turned people more disaffected by politics, and shows how wise the Greeks were, what we've lost, that lesson, when they practiced ostracism. Whenever they felt that there was persons of property and persons of great influence influencing politics, they banished them. They literally ostracized them. They exiled them. Today we exile democracy, and the people of property and the people of money have actually captured our institutions in terms of finance campaign, in terms of lobbies. It was really sad to see the Supreme Court of the US in 2010 deciding that companies and rich people can contribute as much as they like for campaign finance. That really brought about the death of democracy and the disaffection that there is for electoral democracy and for political parties across the globe is very worrying. Is very worrying. And more than that, and I can say this from my personal experience as a foreign affairs minister, I was shocked to see some of my colleagues actually not be top diplomats of their countries, but top arms dealers of their countries. And I am not exaggerating, and there is nothing conspiratorial about this. And I will mention names so that it's not, it's not something that I'm making up. And it's a person, on a personal level, I respect him. So again, nothing personal. But I remember one of my colleagues, Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French foreign minister, who I used to worry a bit because I was working to build relations with Turkey, with Cyprus, with Athens, with Cairo at the same time. Used to tell me, don't sort of meddle with these things. I mean, just be quiet. And I used to say, no, we need to try and diffuse tension, the tension that there is in the Eastern Mediterranean, which I noticed, strangely enough, used to rise a lot when it was time for the French to sell weapons to the Egyptians and to the Greeks. Once the contracts were signed, the tension used to come down again. So first, generate the feeling that there is tension, there is conflict, so you need to arm yourself better. Once you have the deal, once you've signed the contract, then the crisis has passed. And I used to wonder why was this gentleman from France, Jean-Yves Le Drian, so keen on working in this area, till I was told that he used to be elected from the military-industrial complex of France. That is where the factories were. That is where the companies were based. That is where the workers, thousands of workers. So it's not just the owners, but it's a whole cycle, no? The thousands of workers whose work depend on armament. So I think what has become very, very worrying about weapons today is that in a number of countries, the section which produces arms is the most advanced part of the economy. So for them, selling armaments is not necessarily to make war or to create a market for war, but because that is where their technology and where their investment is at its best, and it is selling a lot. So for them, they generate. Now, what happens then is once you sell armaments, you need markets. And the markets for armaments are wars and conflict. And again, how we have devalued the diplomacy is incredible, especially in the West, and I saw it a lot in the European Union, even when the war hadn't started yet in Ukraine. Whenever some of us spoke about the need for diplomacy and to sit down and discuss, we were told no, the issue needs to be addressed and settled on the battlefield. And this is not in the Council of the Ministers of Defense. This is in the Council of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, where it is their job to try and restrain their colleague, who is the Minister of Defense, whose tool is war. In our case, our tool should be diplomacy. And just a consideration to make before we can start the discussion. I was a child when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. So we're talking 1962. I was 10 years old. But I remember it is something which has, even at that time, I didn't understand what the geopolitical implications were, but I was being told that the world might come to an end. Now, coming from a very Catholic country at that time, it was tied also to the secrets of Fatima, that 3 days of darkness was going to come, and that the end of the world is near because there is a big fight between the Soviet Union and the United States. So I tried to follow. Later on, obviously, I studied a lot the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there we have a lesson which we have not learned, that there is a way of diffusing even the most deep conflict. If you try to talk to each other, if you try to trust each other, if you keep contacts going, and you don't resort, shoot first, talk later. So if we, especially for young diplomats, I give lectures to young diplomats, I tell them to study a lot what happened in those days in October 1962, because there the apocalypse was averted with a lot of patient work, because on both sides there were people who said we must not have war. It's a decision that you need to take, and it's a choice of civilization, because I think reverting to violence is very natural for us. Being angry, trying to destroy each other is very natural. It's peace that it's an act of civilization, that it's a choice, and that's why the issue of peace is not simply a policy. It's a civilization. It's seeing others as human beings, trying to empathize, trying to understand others from their point of view. And this is what prevented then a nuclear war from breaking out in 1962, because both on the side of the United States and of the Soviet Union, there were people who wanted war and who wanted to destroy each other. But there were others, at least they prevailed in those days, in those 10 days, they prevailed in this, so to keep on talking to each other and to contact each other. It's very sad that a few months later, both President Kennedy and Secretary General Khrushchev were gone. It's very sad, because both of them were somehow or other historically the good people are destroyed and then taken away from there. So and one point that I really feel the need to make: cooperative security. I from where I come, as a small island, and obviously for us, war is a disaster. Always a disaster. Always. We're so small that we cannot even defend ourselves, even if we want to. So for us, war is a disaster. That's why peace for us means it's not an abstract value. Peace is our survival. Peace is our economy. Peace is our livelihood. Peace is our existence. And we were very happy that way back in 1975, and this is one of the really sad experiences of last year. Last year, we should have been celebrating 50 years of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe in 1975, when you had so many countries on both sides of the Berlin Wall, and also the United States, Canada, and other countries, coming together and saying, listen, we do not agree. We are at conflict with each other. But there are areas where we can start to work together. And there were the economic basket, the cultural basket, the political basket. And that process, I am sure, this is not studied enough, but that process helped to bring down the Berlin Wall. That process quietly helped to bring down the Berlin Wall. When we talk of the collapse of the Soviet Union, as if it's the victory of one side over the other, that is a very narrow-minded partisan interpretation of a complex reality. The CSCE eventually had to evolve in the Organization for the Security of Cooperation in Europe. But that was not the road taken, unfortunately. The road taken was NATO expansion. So instead of sitting together and saying, listen, we need cooperative security in Europe, which means that I will not threaten you, you will not threaten me. And that the concept of security needs to be common. You know, the dream of Gorbachev of building a common European home from Lisbon to Vladivostok. It is that makes sense. It is that makes sense. And we need it for different regions. We can have the same process in the Gulf. You know, instead of having a war there in Iran at the moment, and the Gulf countries really on the verge of collapsing, you know, with their infrastructure, both in terms of energy, water, etc. Every region in the world should have the architecture of cooperative security to work together. And my last point is this. I will draw your attention. I don't know whether you know his work, but I really feel that he needs to be known better. This is a German sculptor called Thomas Schutte, who has a series of works. They are at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, MoMA, which are called United Enemies. I think even the name is very evocative, very interesting, where he has these two ugly people, ugly men. They would like to kill each other and they hate each other. You can tell from the expressions on their face. But ironically, the only way they can stay alive is to help each other stay alive. They are bound by the same rope, and they are standing on the same stilts. And for them not to fall and destroy each other is to help each other stay upright. That is how the world is. Whether we hate each other, whether we love each other, whether we are neighbors, whether we are adversaries, the only way this world can stop from destroying itself is that we find ways of being together. Now, the problem there is a big clash between those who want to dominate and those who want coexistence. You know, if you want to dominate, it means you don't accept others as human beings. You want them to serve you, you want them to be inferior. Whereas in coexistence, whether it's peaceful or not peaceful, but at least coexistence, we respect each other and respect each other's cultures and differences and diversities as human beings. And that is the way forward. It's not easy, but there is no other way. It's either coexistence or no existence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evariste. Thank you very much indeed for speaking so clearly from your experience, but also from the heart, without the artifices of officialdom. So thank you very much. I'm going to invite colleagues to come in, make comments, maybe ask for points of clarification, questions, and we can open the floor. I'll need a little bit of help, Grazia, finding hands because I'm not able to see them on my
Sure.
machine.
Yeah. There is Alessandro, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Alessandro?
I just wanted to thank everybody for a very clear and beautiful presentation, and just say that, you know, I co-direct a nonprofit in New York that deals with many different things, but particularly we focus on the relationship between majority and minority. And I have a bunch of interns, 10 young kids. Past 8 years of 8 months, I've been working on a project on the formation of Bangladesh in 1971. And looking for materials to present them, I happened to find your website, and I find so many absolutely stunning and interesting things there. And I particularly appreciate your tone, which is so you have this pitch perfect way of being able to tackle very complex and difficult things in very simple language, no jargon, no rhetoric. And so I just wanted to really thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now we have Mark and then Corrado.
Okay.
Thank you. Is my mic working?
Yes, it is, Mark. Yep.
So thank you very much, Everest, for your inspiring talk. We are the same age, I discover. Only, unlike you, I have 6 grandchildren, and therefore probably 6 times as much reason to be preoccupied about the future of the planet. You know, I very much agree with you. And by the way, I worked for 2 years in the Secretariat of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. It was my first job. And so I lived that process, and I could see it unfolding between 2 very suspicious blocs who, just by getting to know each other, began to find that they had a great deal in common. And that's actually nothing new, because the trade theory, back to Adam Smith, says that the advantages of open trade is not, of course, that you get access to commercial goods and services at a competitive price. It is that 2 things happen. One is that you build mutual dependence. And so if I were heavily invested in Malta, for example, I would be very concerned about the stability of the Maltese economy, about the stability of Maltese society, and it would be one of my priorities to do what I could to maintain it. But the other aspect of that, the other side of that coin, is that it also creates mutual understanding. So mutual dependence and mutual understanding, because the more you interact around common interests, the more you realize that, in fact, they're not a terrible enemy. They're not the devil incarnate. They're people like you and me with hopes and fears and children and grandchildren. And so one of the things we've seen over the past couple decades, and it coincides with the growth of militarization and the growth of capture by the oligarchy of democratic process, is actually the breakdown in this, so that people are set up as enemies. People, Trump threatened to end the civilization, the millennia old civilization in Iran, which can only be the fruit of complete and total ignorance and manipulation of opinion formation that is probably the most dangerous aspect of the world as is today. As you can see, I agree with you. What I would love to have some insight on is, how do we know where we need to get to, we know where we are today. What are some of your ideas on how we can make that happen beyond the sort of patient interaction, cooperation, building of new models, and so on? What can we do? I mean, just you have a great deal of experience with the European Union. What can we do in the European community to try and back away from this sort of crazy move towards militarization? Thanks.
Shall I react now, or do we get some more comments?
Let's maybe have one more comment, and then we'll turn to you, Évariste. But that's a very, very good set of questions, Mark. We'll hold them. Does anyone want to come in?
There is Corrado and Jeff, and then I had a point as well.
Okay, so Corrado, and then we'll turn to Évariste for some reactions, comments, possible answers. Yeah. Corrado?
Well, hello everybody. Actually, I have no children, so I don't have grandchildren. So, nonetheless, I am still very interested in the environmental conservation. I don't know if there is a cause and effect in that, but I think that it's very important to focus on the environmental conservation before many other issues. And I want to stress a couple of points of your very clear presentation. One is about democracy. We still use the term democracy for a system that is not democratic anymore. As you said, we are in a real, call it oligarchy, or I prefer to say oligocracy, because it explains better the power, the top-down power, rather than oligarchy that has, in my opinion, a different meaning. But this is just a linguistic issue that I don't want to elaborate too much now. But anyway, democracy belongs to the past, at least in the form we have experienced. And we should begin to challenge the oligarchs and the people who are in power. Why don't we speak any longer of expropriation? All along the 19th century, it was a major and a crucial issue. But now we don't speak anymore. Why could people, and why may people have the possibility to inherit it and having this huge power? I think expropriation is a political issue to put on the table, and we can do it both from a Marxist point of view and from a libertarian point of view, because monopolism is not libertarian at all. But I would even forget about libertarianism and the Marxists. We need to find even something new, a new way of thinking. But expropriation and a radical change of the ruling class is crucial. That's why I use the word oligocracy versus oligarchy, because an oligarchy can be also a good term for a new political system. The second point regards when you mentioned, well, what I'm saying is very obvious, but I think, and it comes from what you said. You mentioned the Cuba crisis in '62. We have the same age. And actually, I'm 2 years older, but never mind, more or less. You were 10, I was 12, and more or less, we didn't understand anything either. Nonetheless, the times were very different, and not only because we have many actors on the political scene. At the times, there were only two, Russia, the Soviet Union, and the United States. While now the actors are, the political scene is multiform. We don't have only China, Russia, United States, but also countries that are very powerful ideologically, in the public opinion, like Iran, we are talking about now, but India is a major actor. So the situation is completely different and far more complicated. And another point is very different from the past, is that in '62, the big war, the World War II, had ended just since 17 years. And after that war, we had a completely reconstruction of the international politics. Now, now that construction belong to the past. Almost think about, we are grown up enough to say that it's almost 80 years that we are in the same structure. And the United Nations are an organization. Well, the United Nations, the Bretton Woods Economic Organization, are sort of 80 years old organization, 80-year-old ideas. So we are really in a moment that we have to change. That our institutions are old. We have to think completely out of the box because the old schemes are gone. It's difficult to try to patch, to correct. It's like to patch a dress that is completely worn, completely finished. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Corrado, for those comments. Évariste, can we turn to you?
Yes.
To react to comments made by Mark and Corrado, but in whatever order you prefer.
I can start with what we've just heard. We must remember not to be provincial, not to be parochial, especially those of us who find it difficult to remember that the world is bigger than the West. Sometimes we forget that in Europe, we're just about 6% of the world. The bloc of the West is about 14%, and we think that the 14% is the 100%. It is not the 100%. And the birth of the multipolar world that has already started. It's not that the multipolar world is coming. It is here. I'll just mention some statistics which I think are important. Every year, and it is due now for last year, the Australian Social Policy Institute, ASPI, publishes a kind of index in terms of the technologies of the world for the 21st century. They track 74 technologies that are needed today, and then they list how the various countries feature in that index. Out of 74, China is number 1 in 67. The second country is India, 50. The United States has lost its legacy, and it's only leading in about 7 technologies. The European Union in 2 technologies. So if there is an indication of where the world is going and how from a unipolar world, which is dominated by one center of power, we're now moving to different centers of power and shared power. Now, this is the biggest clash that is happening. It's usually at these moments when wars break out, because those who have dominated want to continue dominating, but they cannot, because those who have been dominated push back and don't want to be dominated anymore. If that clash can be managed peacefully, then it's okay. But usually empires do not propose their own decline. They try to fight it. They try to extend their power as much as possible. The same thing is happening in economics. If we see the rate of growth in the West compared to the rate of growth in Asia, for example, it's 1 to 5. And, this is having a big effect. What is also having a big effect, which is ironically positive, I would like to draw your attention to a very interesting article that George Orwell had written in 1948, which is called The Atom Bomb and You. and it's a very interesting essay, very provocative essay, where there he talks about giving claws to the weak. So he was saying that unfortunately the history of civilization is the history of armaments, is the history of how the technology of armaments developed, because it's not the first time that one country has dominated another, not because it had a superior civilization, but because it had superior firepower. It's enough to look at what happened 500, 600 years ago with the Europeans going to colonize Latin America and parts of Africa, and in Asia they had a superior civilization, but they didn't have rifles. So, and that made all the difference. They didn't have cannons. So Orwell makes the point that when the weak can have armaments to defend themselves, then that is weakening, obviously, the powerful ones. Now, just a bit of a reflection on what's happening in the Gulf, and that the United States, for example, has to spend millions of dollars to destroy armaments like drones that cost only $20,000. What is also very interesting is that with the development of drone technology and hypersonic missiles, they are making aircraft carriers and navies obsolete. They are also making military bases obsolete, because basically military bases are aircraft carriers on land. So if we see what has happened over there, this is going to change military doctrine, and has also implications for war and peace. Because if at least the weak can push back and defend themselves, I mean, I would like that instead of sending drones and hypersonic missiles, that we throw flowers at each other. I mean, I would really love to have that, But if when such wars happen and the weak can push back militarily, that is an interesting development. I would like you to read that essay, because it makes us reflect on how the weak can stand up and need to stand up to the strong and powerful. What is frightening about also what is happening in the Gulf is that the message that has been passed, I think, over the last 40 years probably, is if you don't want to be attacked or you don't want to be invaded, get nuclear armaments. This is frightening because why is North Korea? Why doesn't anyone meddle with North Korea? So what is sad is that the message that we're sending is, if you really want to have security, don't talk about diplomacy, don't talk about peace, don't talk about guarantees. Get yourself nuclear weapon, and like that they will leave you alone. This is really frightening, because if this trend strengthens, we are on the verge of a nuclear arms race, which will be even more destructive than we've had so far. So this is because, imagine now, if the way things develop in Iran will say, listen, the only way we can move forward is to have nuclear armaments. What will Saudi Arabia do? What will Egypt do? What will Turkey do? What will the United Arab Emirates do? And so on and so forth, even in other countries. So this is really worrying. But I insist at the same time, it's interesting to see how the technology of drones and hypersonic missiles is changing the reality on the battlefield. Talking about trade. Now that is why in the last 4 or 5 years, some people who I thought were very intelligent and sane have started talking about trade in the same way that warmongers talk about war. I was really shocked to hear people who I thought were sensible and intelligent, like Christine Lagarde and Janet Yellen, giving a speech to company directors and CEOs that we should trade only with our friends. We should trade only with a small basket of friends who share the same values that we share. Now, that is a recipe for disaster in more sense than one. Because if you say we're only going to trade with friends, it's not even realistic, because you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough markets, you need resources from other countries, from countries like, for example, China, that you don't share your values with, but you need rare earth from there, you need other resources from other countries, which have a different political and economic system. So it doesn't even make sense. And that is why it's worrying that we have allowed now to use trade and commerce as if it's a war by other means. And that, I think, we need to push back, to say we need to go back to acknowledge that we have an interdependent world, and that we talk together, we trade together, and we try to understand each other. What is to be done? Not easy to say that. I do not. I must be honest about this. One thing that I always tell young people that I'm in touch with is to try and have no illusion, but not to become disillusioned. Because if we become disillusioned, we become cynical, and that is poison. I mean, it doesn't help anyone. So it's important that even when we talk to young people, we are realistic, don't present them any illusions, but at the same time, tell them, please do not become disillusioned. We must try to find a way. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we face today, of how to live without illusions, but without becoming disillusioned. I must say, I have no trust in any of the, I think apart from the Prime Minister of Spain, Sanchez, I do not see much, and the Belgian Prime Minister, to be fair to him as well. I do not see much wisdom coming from Brussels. Definitely not from von der Leyen and not from Kaja Kallas, who talk as if the European Union's future is to fight with everybody. You know, obviously now we're on bad terms with Trump, but we need to fight with China, we need to fight with Russia. India will try to find a way of getting... We have to get away from this kind of mindset, because we need to rediscover, if we ever had it, humility, that we are not superior to others, that we must look on the former colonies as partners. So when we talk about decolonization, it's not only colonies that need to be decolonized, but even the former empires. They need to decolonize their mentality and stop looking at the rest of the world, which is about 86% of the world. I mean, wasn't it terrible recently when on the 25th of March there was that vote on slavery at the United Nations, and an opportunity was lost to say that slavery was one of the most grave, crimes against humanity. Why did the United States, Israel, and Argentina vote against? Why did the European Union abstain? Couldn't we have at least come to the point of saying, listen, yes, it was a grave crime against humanity. Now, I know what is said, but that means that they look for compensation now, they will ask us for money, but even the resolution was so tame, was so moderate, because it only said, let us discuss. There was nothing binding about it. It was, let us discuss. So unfortunately, there is still a lot of work to be done on changing behavior, on changing mentality, and I think a change of leadership. But what scares me, even if we look at what's happening in the European Union, what's happening in Germany, what's happening in France, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? So this is where it gets very worrying. That the alternative governments, I, I don't think that they will work for peace and for understanding. It's enough to see how they talk about people from other cultures coming to Europe at the time where Europe is facing demographic suicide, not demographic decline, demographic suicide. In the next 50 years, the European Union will lose 50 million, I'm not joking, 50 million people of working age because they have a birth rate which is very low, and in the years ahead, we it's enough to say that Africa will be 5 times bigger than the European Union in terms of population, and we're not even thinking about that. So what we need to do is reach out to as many young people as possible and talk realistically to them about what needs the changes that we need to bring in ourselves, and to build good relations with other cultures and with other continents. We are still very provincial. I see a lot of organizations in Europe of very well-intentioned people, kind, good-hearted, and I ask them, have you reached out to young people in Africa? Have you reached out to young people in Latin America, in Asia? No. And we need to do that. Our future is not only multipolar, it's also multicultural, multi-civilizational, multilateral. We need to understand we need to understand each other. There is an Estonian, and it would be good to get him, Grazia, to talk about, to invite him to give a presentation. I think he's either in his late 70s or early 80s. He's from Estonia, Rein Mullersen. Rein Mullersen makes a very simple point, no? That about 80,000 years ago, we were all one family. We came out of West Africa and then we spread all over the globe. And because we scattered in different communities according to the geography, the climate, the different experiences we've had, we've obviously grown apart now. We are biologically, we're a single family, but culturally, there is so much diversity. To bring us together, to understand each other, to live together now on this planet is a big challenge, because usually what is different from us can be frightening, can be, and I think one of the tragic things that happened, and I'll end on this note, one of the tragic things that has happened, I see it in Europe, is that the whole issue of immigration, which has been, the discussion has become totally irrational, is, I mean, it's enough to tell you how sad it is. I was 7 years employment minister in the Going for Social Affairs councils in Brussels, talking about employment. We never discussed immigration in 7 years. When I became Minister for Foreign Affairs, we used to discuss migration and security. We never discussed immigration and workforce, immigration and employment, and what needs to be done, because it's not easy, what needs to be done to get people to be able to work together. So what happened at that time? There were parties who sided with the migrants and parties who sided with the citizens, with the natives. Now, both sides have serious concerns to be taken care of. You can't simply dismiss people who say, listen, there are a lot of people coming into our country. They have a different culture. They have a different religion. they're taking over our place. That needs to be addressed. You can't simply say they are racist, and that they hate foreigners. That has to be taken seriously and try at the local level to build a culture of living together, of coexistence. But unfortunately, this wasn't done. And now we're at the stage where it's really irrational, really irrational. You can't even talk about this because you'll be considered, coming from another planet. But I'll stop here. Sorry.
Mm. Thank you, Evariste. That's great. I think we had a couple more comments, questions. Who was next on the list? I think it was
Jeff?
you, Grazia, wasn't it?
No, it's Jeff.
Jeff, yeah. Jeff, can you come in, please?
Yes. Thank you so much, Everest. So many rich thoughts you're sharing with us, and many of which really speak to me. I want to quickly just refer you to the op-ed I put in the chat from The Guardian today, calling for this shift from petromasculinity to eco-masculinity. I don't agree with everything in there, but that broad frame, I think, is very, very rich, and I think it's at the heart of what Everest is bringing to us today. One of the pieces of the puzzle, it responds or echoes back to Carolyn Merchant's book Death of Nature, who looked at the long traditions of within Western cultures of domination of nature and women as being tied together. And what we're seeing, I think this also is part of what we're this very disturbing thing. It's on Earth Day today. I sent a note out on social media today about, happy Earth Day, but maybe not so happy because we're seeing this global retreat, both on peace and on environment. And here in Canada, we have this new Prime Minister, Carney, who is distinguishing himself in the world stage as seeking alternatives to the strong reliance of Canada on the United States. At the same time, one of the things he's patted himself on the back the most about recently is meeting the NATO quotient in terms of militarizing our economy here. And he's pushed through laws that have eliminated carbon taxes, given ministries the right to
Mm,
override or ignore all kinds of environmental laws. There are this echo, and this, of course, much worse in the United States, but we also see this happening in Europe and other parts of the world. So I think I've mentioned to this group, and I really want to invite those. You could send me a note in the chat if you're interested in discussing this privately. I'm working on a 3-day session at a Quaker gathering this summer on peace on Earth, peace with Earth, because the ecological side of this, the environmental side of this, I'm feeling a real calling to bring that more out in the open with those who wish to do it, and I know that is part of what this group is concerned about. I'm trying to learn about as part of this the Guyana Goa, the Great Law of Peace, which I think speaks to this problem that Everest is bringing us to, because that's the story of how these warring nations within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy before colonial Europeans arrived found a way to organize themselves around peace, around dialogue, around the kinds of solutions we're thinking of. So there are these, it's not the only one. I'm focused on it because it's here where I live. It's the law that emerged from the relationship of people with this place. And it has that wonderful lesson about organizing formerly warring groups around a commitment to peace and to dialogue. It's built on strong connection and love of place. There's a wonderful part of this Guyana Goa, which is the ceremony of condolence. When there is outbreaks of violence, when there is warring, there's a commitment to getting together and holding each other in a space of condolence, so that you can feel the pain together and then work from there to get past it. How many examples in the world could we think where something like that would be useful these days? So maybe there's something we can do on gathering these kinds of examples of shifting from violent cultures to cultures of peace and dialogue and getting along, that can really speak to this situation. Because when you're talking about interterritorial relations, there is that gets the Haudenosaunee kind of worked it out within themselves. It was a mixed bag with how they dealt
Yes.
with other people, although they also came up with treaties like the Treaty of the Dish and the Spoon to work with other nearby nations on sharing territory and working together. Just a quick note on trade. Yeah, it's the frame is competitivity. It's divide and fight it out. It's like you get my agricultural sector to be win out over your agricultural sector, and it's all done in designed to amass wealth and growth. But this whole system is driving an ecologically unsustainable global economy. Another thing our prime minister just did, he appointed this advisory committee. It's the automobile sector. It's this sector, that sector. You know who's not represented there? Is anybody dealing with the environment. It's shocking. And the last thing, Everest, I'm really glad you brought this word in because I go to it very often these days. The word wisdom and being wise and seeking wise leaders, along with leaders who can tap into humility and compassion in the way they deliver leadership. So I think yes, absolutely, we need people who come to understand that there are certain things we're capable of doing, but they're unwise above all, and they lead to bad results in the long term. So thank you very much.
Mm.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for those comments. Great. Maybe another comment, reaction before turning back to Evariste.
Grazia is trying to come in.
Okay, over to you, Grazia.
Thanks so much. I was delighted, Everest, about your talk, and in fact, sorry, in fact, what I had to get someone in, and I'm sorry that I've lost for a moment the meaning. I'm delighted about many of the things that you said to us, and in particular, the new dimensions of militarism that perhaps we have touched a little bit less in our group so far. One is the dimension of sanctions that I will find very interesting for us to go more in depth into in the future. I had just read myself that article, well, at least actually this abstract of the article in the Lancet that you mentioned, and I will share it with everybody in the group in the reply. But also, I think you stressed very appropriately the dimensions of the capture of the state, also via media, entertainment, and academia, which I believe somehow are the soft spot for the militarism that we might want to look into ourselves. I particularly also enjoyed the fact that you told us that some old ways of militarism are changing fast, and we may want to look into what kind of vulnerability they may present in the fact that they are changing fast, such as military bases, aircraft carriers, the fact that they become obsolete from one day to the next. It might present for a group like ours, which is looking at what we can do, some room for thinking. You also talked about that atom bomb anew, which reminded me of The Weapons of the Weak, which is a book by an anthropologist called James Scott, who died recently. And I was wondering, what can we, a group of overeducated elders, some with plenty of grandchildren, some without grandchildren, but all sharing the same kind of right pitch that you showed in your talk, and Alessandro very properly highlighted. What can we all do in terms of the weapons of the weak? Because we are weak, but we are many. I mean, if you just look into our website, I find fascinating and I find useful to put on all the all everything that I find every week related to groups, organizations, publications, newsletters, all about us, all about wanting to enhance cooperation, collaboration, so-called peace, because peace is becoming boring. But how do we do it is the major thing. Some people focus on one particular issue like drones, others focus on nuclear, prohibiting nuclear weapons. We are all having important elements. Perhaps what we miss is the connection between and among all of us. And perhaps rightly, someone like you could tell us what would be the best way to identify the weapons of the weak, which Scott, as you all know, identified for the real poor in this world, the one who suffered from colonialism and so on, in the unclear and subtlest ways of ridicule and lying and cheating and saying yes sir and doing exactly the opposite, all these sorts of very effective weapons that, however, are not immediately strong or evident. So I would love if you could tell us what can we do as a group of elders, which elders for disarmament and the cultures of peace, who are in many ways capable and in many ways feeling the sense of being absolutely helpless because we are disaggregated, because we are all in our own small sense of desperation. I mean, frankly, today, looking at what's happening, many of us feel desperate. So, what can we do? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Michelle, shall I?
Yes, please do. Yes.
So, let me start from something that I think would be very helpful. So, while trying to understand the culture and civilizations of others, I think it's very important, whether it's African, Latin American, Asian, we must not forget that our Western civilization is also capable of great things. We must not let those for whom Western civilization means colonialism, Nazism, militarism. It's true, these things did come out from the West. But there are a lot of good things that have come out from the West. And we need to rediscover those to make contact with other cultures. So, for example, I was really struck by what Jeff was saying. For me, one of the greatest figures we've had in the West is Saint Francis of Assisi, who in such a simple way spoke about creation and about existence and about life as belonging to the same family, not just human beings, but we are the brothers and sisters of the wind, of the animals, of the flowers, of the sun, of the planets. And when we hurt one of the members of this family, we are hurting ourselves. Now, to recover Saint Francis as an important cultural icon from the West helps us to come in touch with cultures that Jeff was talking about from other continents. So I think that is something which is important. At the same time, even while colonialism was happening, And while domination was happening from the West, you had people in the West who were not agreeing and who were saying, listen, we don't agree with slavery. We don't agree with thinking that because the Aztecs or the Mexicans speak in a different way or dress in a different way, they are inferior to us. And if they don't become Christian, they don't have a soul. We had even Christian priests who are saying, those are our brothers, whatever their religion is, whatever their culture is. We must bring up these people, these characters. I always say, and I'm sure that Grazia will be happy about what I'm going to say now. One of my heroes is Enrico Mattei. Enrico Mattei is a great man, great man. By the way, he's responsible for the war in Iran, and I will explain why. Because way back in the 50s, it was Enrico Mattei who persuaded Mossadegh, the Democratic Prime Minister of Iran at that time, nationalize the oil. That oil is yours. Resource sovereignty is very crucial. How can you have political sovereignty? How can you decide about the future of your country if the resources that you have are not owned by you, obviously, not to rape them, but to use them for the benefit of your people and to use them wisely. Enrico Mattei told the Iranians, nationalize your oil industry, not only nationalize your own industry, but also nationalize the Iranian British company. And that is when Winston Churchill got together with Roosevelt to carry out a coup d'etat organized by the CIA and the MI6 to, to remove Mossadegh from power. The Shah was brought in, and the rest is history. So somebody like Enrico Mattei, who was going to these countries and telling them, we want to be partners. Instead of 70-30 profit structure, we'll have 50-50. Instead of taking your energy and exploiting it for our benefit, we will share it. You have the resources. We have the know-how. I am going to organize a college in Turin, and you can send your young people to learn about running your own petrochemical industry. This is what Enrico Mattei was doing, and that is why the French, the Dutch, the British, the American oligarchs were not happy with him.
And they killed him.
And wonder of wonders, he was on a small plane and it was brought down. So we have these icons in the West who have been decent people, who have good values, who look on the rest of humanity as partners, as human. Let's bring them up again, because it's not fair that the West is only those who go to war and those who dominate others and those who subjugate others. It's something that we also say for our young people, because our young people do not know about these icons. They think that it's only what is fashionable today, which is I was very shocked to hear a young man in Palermo who I'm sure was a decent young man, but he was saying, the politicians are terrible, political parties are terrible, we should go for hyper neoliberalism. No governments, we should privatize everything. I know where his despair was coming from. I could understand, because he feels let down. He feels let down by politicians. Then I had a chat with him after, and I said, listen, I was shocked to hear you talk like that. I'm sure that you're a decent human being. And I said, because what you propose is what is happening. It's socialism for the rich. It's taking, as Martin Luther King has taught us, no? It's taking money. If you give it to people who need it, that is bad socialism. If you take public funds and give it to banks and give it to the military industrial complex, that is wisdom, that is wise. you're being clever, you're being smart, you're planning for the future. So we should expose this, that they are doing what they're doing is really expropriating wealth and giving it to the powerful against the weak. So Grazia, you made a very important point about trying to find a common framework to bring together all these different sort of know-hows and all these different approaches. Let's think a bit about it, because um, the way to do it is as much as possible to break down silos. That is a problem, but because yes, we cannot think only of peace. It's important. With peace goes the environment, development. It's and again, what Jeff was saying. It's so sad to see the same thing happening in the European Union. Saying that all the commitments that we made to become to go for renewable energy and to move away from the diesel and fuel economy. We're going back on that. We used to have the dream that the European Union meant peace, meant development, meant environmental protection, meant social protection. Where all that unfortunately is being lost, and ironically, the country that has invested most in renewable energy and now is finding it to its advantage is China, because China has become more self-sufficient because of its investments also in solar energy and wind energy. And recently, I was following some presentations in Africa about the microgrids that are being installed there, where it is cheap solar energy in terms of capital investment, but apparently the Chinese have managed to store and distribute solar energy in a very interesting way, which makes it more not only affordable, but actually makes it a viable and a good alternative to carbon and to petrol and diesel and the other fuel. It is something which is very interesting, because I think one way of bringing back trust even to people like us is to not only to be able to talk nicely and to talk poetically, but also to suggest practical solutions. So for example, I realize that when you talk to young people and tell them, listen, this is not something that is going to be done in the future. Like, for example, about these microgrids technologies of storing solar energy and then distributing it. And it's microgrids because you can do it on a village level instead of having a centralized power station. You can go to different localities and do it at a micro level. It's good to find these sort of practical solutions, so that what we say about the environment, what we say about peace, what we say about development, we show that this is not something which is just airy-fairy, but it's practical. It's important that we are dreamers, but that we are practical dreamers. It's always difficult to put the two together, but that is what we need: practical dreams. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Evariste. Thank you very much. I think if there are no more other questions or comments, we're going to bring this session, very interesting session, to a close. I just want to check in the room. Are there any other burning issues, comments? I can't see everyone. I think.
Grazie.
No, I'm just clapping.
Okay, so I don't see any hands. I hope I'm not excluding anyone. I don't see any hands.
I don't
If
see
I
it
am,
either,
come
Misha.
forward. Okay. Well, that leaves me to thank immensely Evariste on the behalf of everyone. I think we've all enjoyed your wisdom, your experience, and the very relaxed and hopeful way you've drawn a map and connections between many different moving parts. I'm sure many of us will look again at the video recording, and newcomers will also be able to see it.
Michelle, let me interrupt you a bit.
Yes.
Because I'm incurable. I'm a teacher as well. I'm incurable. Can I suggest some reading material which helps me to survive every day, not to fall into cynicism? And I would recommend, I'm sure that some of you must have read these books, but I'll recommend them. It's The Search for Meaning of Viktor Frankl. You know, a person who has survived Auschwitz and can smile and can laugh and can enjoy a sunset must be admirable. So I really recommend The Search for Meaning of Viktor Frankl. I would also recommend Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, because I think Hemingway shows us that even when we catch our dream, you know, our big fish, and the sharks eat it, it's still an achievement. We bring it on shore and we show that we have caught a big fish, even if the sharks eat it. You know, we must not give up. And then remember a speech that Churchill never gave. He is attributed to have given it. You know, never, ever, ever give up.
Okay, we'll take your good advice, and thank you immensely for that. And again, people who will be looking at the recording will be able to access a lot of your good thinking and the breadth of your knowledge. I'd like to thank everyone who's come along, and also those of you who were able to comment. It's great. We've had some fantastic comments, and I'd like to personally listen to them again. But without going on for too long, I want to thank again Evariste. It's been a great presentation. I've certainly enjoyed your humanity and your joy and your hope. And that's quite reflected in the 3 book titles that you just mentioned. I might leave Winston Churchill out myself, but
yes, of course, I agree. But that's why he never gave that speech. It's
yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Evariste,
and thank you for getting in touch with me. I'm really happy that you reached out to me. And let's stay together. I'll be around. Thank you.
We certainly shall. Thank you, and thank you, everyone, and wishing you a lovely evening, a lovely morning, and go well. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.